Hey everybody, it's Tony Kriz here with Off the Highway. And who's that? Is that the brilliant Dr. Cornel West? No, but the also brilliant Joshua Ryan Butler, author of Skeletons in God's Closet. The Mercy of Hell, the Surprise of Judgment, and the Hope of Holy War. Holy War, Joshua. That's something we usually talk about, things way in the past, God destroying nations, and yet we live in a world today with more wars than ever before. What thoughts do you have about holy war and how it pertains to life in the 21st century?
Definitely. So I think when most of us hear the word holy war, we think of the strong kind of using God or the gods to justify their conquest of the weak. Like, we want to take your stuff, and so we're going to call on our gods to kind of prove it, to be on our side. And I don't think that's at all the biblical picture. I would say that actually what's going on in the biblical story is actually taking that image of holy war and turning it on its head. Because first, it's not the strong against the weak. It's actually God rising up on behalf of the weak, I would say, against the tyranny of the strong. So you look at Israel in the Old Testament as an example, and they're like slaves. They've been in Egypt for 400 years with the boot of empire on their neck, just kind of getting crushed underneath the imperial powerhouses of the ancient world. And there comes the point where God has heard their cry. He's patiently been patient with Egypt and with Canaan and kind of these mighty empires of the world. And there comes the point where his patience runs out, and he rises up. I think like a father stepping onto the playground for his disabled younger child who's getting beat up by these bigger, older, stronger bullies, and he says, "I'm going to fight for you." And so there's this picture where it's not the strong against the weak, it's actually the weak going up against the strong. But so we could look at that and go, okay, well, it's the weak going up against the strong, but isn't that like terrorism today? Like, terrorists believe they're the weak going up against the strong like us. But the radical distinction in the biblical story is that God is the one actually doing the fighting. You look at like the strategies that are showing up in the Bible, and they're ridiculous. You know, like God's like, march around the walls of Jericho for 7 days and then blow trumpets, you know, and you're like going, okay, military strategy today. You know, can you imagine like the Mongols marching up to the Great Wall of China and making music instead of war, you know, or like World War II, storming the beaches of Normandy and busting out rock guitars or something and playing music. It's upside down, it's backwards, and I think we see this over and over and over again, that almost virtually every story in kind of Israel and Canaan and all, the battle strategies are ridiculous, and I think they're ridiculous on purpose because they're designed to prove a point that God's the one who's actually accomplishing the victory and winning the fighting. So it's not the weak going up against the strong, it's God going up against the strong on behalf of the weak. Now, there are a lot of other issues that come up, like why is it so brutal, why is it so violent? Maybe we could talk about it another time. I go in a lot more detail in the book. But one of the things that I would suggest is that today, I believe this can actually be a source of hope as we look at kind of the big structures and economic and political forces that often crush and oppress the poor, the downtrodden, the weak, and it can seem like God's left the building and God's abandoned. But I've come to the conviction, William, that God is actually just more patient than we are. But his patience will not last forever. There's a time coming when God will arise against the powerhouse structures that we've built that crush the downtrodden of the world, and he'll rise up to tear them down and to establish his kingdom. And that's actually a source of hope for the oppressed of the world.
Thank you, everybody. That's Joshua Ryan Butler, author of Skeletons in God's Closet. Thanks for your time, Josh.